Hello and welcome to your next session here at Forward 50. My name is Alex Howard. I'm here as the channel host today. We're here to talk about becoming digital for citizens. We're going to have perspectives from the United States, where I'm currently here in Washington, D.C. In the United Kingdom, we're going to have some folks from Scotland sharing some of their common experiences, what they're learning along the way in terms of reacting to the moment we're in. I'm going to get out of the way and introduce your moderator for the day. That's going to be Mark Campbell, who's the Senior Vice President of CGI, and he's going to introduce each of the folks discussing and get right to it. Sorry for starting a little bit late, but we had a couple technical difficulties. That is part of 2020. We're all working through it together, and we're so excited to have you be part of this conversation with these remarkable guests about their work and what they're doing to make digital real. And with that, over to you, Mark.
Excellent. Thanks, Alex. Hello, everyone. It's great to be here again this year, both as a sponsor and also having an opportunity to share some insights with everybody. I'll start off by introducing the panel that's joining me today. So from the UK, where it's 6:30 at the moment versus 1:30 where I am, and officially starting their weekend, we have Nicola Harvey, who is the Chief Officer and Head of Customer and Digital Services for the City of Edinburgh Council. Welcome, Nicola.
Hi.
Also from the UK is my colleague Lindsay McGranaghan, who's responsible for CGI's operations in Scotland, which includes working closely with Nicola and the council. Welcome, Lindsay.
Hi, Mark.
All right, moving to the US, we have Jon Rychalski, who is the Assistant Secretary for Management and Chief Financial Officer of the United States Department of Veterans Affairs. Welcome, Jon.
Hello, everyone.
And joining Jon from the US is my colleague, Dr. Jim Peake, who's a Senior Vice President from our CGI US Federal Operations, and who's also the former United States Secretary of Veterans Affairs. Jim, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining today. We have a lot to cover in 40 minutes, including sharing some success stories, talking about critical success factors, how to navigate the impacts of COVID and leadership, which is one of the key themes of the conference this year. So let's dive in. Well, it's clear governments at all levels are focusing on becoming digital to improve citizen services and experiences. Not all are having the same, I'll say, pace or level of success. Jon and Nicola, you guys have both experienced success along your journey to date. And that's what we're really here to share today. So Nicola, let's start with you. You've been awake the longest and waiting to tell us your story. How about you tell us a little bit about yourself, the digital journey that the City of Edinburgh has been on, and the impact to citizens.
Oh, well, thanks, Mark, and thanks very much for having me along today. A bit about my background. Pretty much my career has been spent in private sector. I was an operations director running a large financial services operation across the UK and the globe. I then moved into outsourcing and ran a number of portfolio of accounts for a very large outsourcer, which gave me great insight into some premium brands that we have in the United Kingdom. Started off in financial services, but moved into retail, and it's so interesting to see how various different organizations and their culture and their digital strategy evolves. And more recently, around about 3 and a bit years ago, I've moved into public sector, which was a huge change for me, and picked up primarily to run customer service for the City of Edinburgh Council. And then I got asked to pick up our IT and digital team and work collaboratively with our partner CGI. I'm passionate about customer service and being able to provide easy and reliable service to all consumers or residents, citizens of our city. And one thing that I did very, very quickly on joining the council was to build a strategy. I think it's so important to have that. And when we talk about digital and tech and a smart city, which is the space that I've now moved Edinburgh into, it all sounds very grand and sometimes a little bit scary. And what I've done for Edinburgh is just break it down build a foundation layer of tech that allows us to interact with the residents of Edinburgh very easily, where we do what we say we're going to do, and we do it very swiftly. So we built that strategy. We put in very quickly a new case management system with a portal that allows the residents of Edinburgh to see the assets across the city, and if they're reporting a problem, because we've moved a lot of our services online, they can report that problem very easily, and also, more importantly, get proactive communication. So once a resident of Edinburgh has reported that problem once, if another resident comes along to report the same problem, they don't have to go through a whole set of forms or online questions. They can see it's been logged, and they can register their interest and very quickly start to get that proactive communication. So my strategy really has been built on get the basics right, do what you say you're going to do, and do it easily, and provide that proactive communication to residents. And as a result of that success, working collaboratively with CGI, we've now moved on to bigger things, which is build a smart city strategy. And I can talk a little bit more about that later, if anybody's got any questions that they want to hear about that, but that's the journey that we're now on.
That's great. Thanks, Nicola. That's a great overview. And we have lots of questions, I'm sure. So to your point, we'll get through some of them as we go through the discussion today. Jon, why don't we move to you? Why don't you tell us a little bit about the journey for the U.S. Department of Veterans Affairs? Give us a little bit more background on yourself and the impacts that your journey has had on citizens so far.
Okay, Mark, thanks. So I guess I would describe our journey as maybe the highway to hell. And the reason I say that is we're probably going through the largest digitization, I'm sure it is, in the VA's history. We're simultaneously deploying a new electronic health record, the Cerner Millennium solution, a new logistics system, a new accounting system, acquisition system, and some other smaller systems sort of simultaneously. And I hate to say that the success has to be backed by failure, but unfortunately, in virtually all of those cases, we've had multiple attempts at deploying similar systems through the years. And the one that's most poignant to me, since I work in the accounting financial realm, is the finance and accounting system. Back in the early 2000s, we tried this before. I wasn't there at the time. I was on a contractor that was supporting it. It did not go well. It was called Core FLS. It failed. There were a lot of media stories in the United States about the failure. We ended up getting fired. There was one subsequent attempt to deploy an accounting and acquisition system, also failed. But you know what? I guess the third time is the charm for a lot of these. The electronic health record went live about a week ago at its first location and is working really well. We're poised on Monday to start our new accounting system. It's the CGI Momentum solution. It's going to be with our National Cemetery Administration, and it is looking really good. And so I guess what I would say about success is a lot of times it's backed by failure and lessons learned, which is sort of where we are. But we also have a lot of confidence. We're seeing success. And I guess I would say not to be distracted, when you attempt something and it doesn't work. In the long run, we know that this is going to deliver a better experience to our veterans, which is obviously our primary mission. They're going to have a healthcare record from the time they enter the military all the way through their care in the Veterans Administration. We're going to be able to order and pay for medical devices, things like that, much more seamlessly. So it's been a long journey getting here, but I think that we're going to see the results of that paying off very quickly.
That's great. Thanks, Jon. And it sounds like both of you have been on a journey for a while, had some successes. And I think, maybe we'll shift to talking about, what you started talking about, which is critical success factors and lessons learned. I think, as we're all aware, there is no magic along the way to the journey. I think, you talked about Jon failing. Certainly, I think when we talk to clients, when we talk to different people, it's about getting started. It's about being okay to fail. It's about learning from those failures and moving on. Jon, maybe to come back to you for a moment, what would you say are some of the other success factors, that you've learned and that you want to share with people, and how did you come to realize them?
We learned, I have about equal amount of time in both the federal government and in the private sector. And so I've seen it from both sides. I mentioned that I was on the first attempt to put an accounting system in the VA that failed. What we sort of learned in this exercise is that we were best positioned to lead the effort. We are running the PMO. It's our people that are sort of leading the effort with the support of CGI and a number of other contractors, because nobody knows your business better than you do. Nobody knows the culture, the people, the things that are important to you. I think in earlier attempts, we sort of handed it over to contractors, and it was probably not fair to them, especially with a large bureaucratic organization. One of the big things I learned is to sort of chart your own destiny. The other thing I learned, and this is going to sound kind of stupid, but back in the early 2000s when we tried this, this was sort of the big event at the VA. So there were a lot of eyes on it. We got a lot of media attention, and when it failed, we got a lot of negative publicity. One of the advantages we had with the financial system this time is nobody was really paying attention to us, because the big game in town was the deployment of the electronic health record. And the lesson I learned from that is sometimes it's better to not have a lot of notoriety, to be able to start small, test some things, work your way through things, and get a position where you don't have a lot of scrutiny, like when you're going into a performance. And then when people do notice you, you can tell them like, hey, we were just sort of we had our heads down, we were working, and we got this thing deployed, and it works great. And there was no sensationalism, no muss, no fuss. So a couple of things there: chart your own destiny. Don't be afraid to lead it yourself. And sometimes also start small, and you don't have to have a lot of publicity around it to try and get it off the ground.
Great advice and words of wisdom there, John. Appreciate it. Staying in the U.S. for a minute, Jim, having worked closely with Veterans Affairs on this journey, what's your perspective on what worked well and or what didn't, for that matter, along the way?
Yeah, I think that John laid out a lot of things. The other point I would make is that in Scotland as well, I'm sure, but the VA is a very highly visible, big and complex organization that touches veterans in every single state and territory of the United States. So there's a lot of congressional interest and some politicization of it. And I know that John has, I think, done a tremendous job of dealing with the congressional committees that do the oversight. And I think that's another element of success, is because having a good, consistent story that and building the relationship with the political oversight in these governmental organizations is an extremely important thing.
Excellent. Thanks, Jim. Let's head back to the UK for a minute then. So Nicola, you heard what John and Jim had to say. Does that resonate with you? And is there anything else you'd like to highlight and share with others to learn from your journey?
Yeah, I mean, without question, start small, have a vision, understand how you're going to build up that plan. But also what I would say is build a team round about you, whether it's small or, you've got a large army, build a team that understands your vision and has a drive to actually do something positive. Engage your stakeholders. For me in Edinburgh, we're up against politicians and our elected members. I engaged them all to make sure they understand and understood the journey that I wanted to take the council on. But for me, and that was quite intimidating to a degree, where when people understood the change that I wanted to make that journey for the residents easier to access our services. Some of them were like, let's see you do it, let's see you. People have tried and people have failed, and that can be quite intimidating. But what I would say to everyone out there is be bold. Where there's technology that you've got in your own organization that's not working, which was the journey that I was on, remove it and find a piece of technology that will work for you, and make sure you do your due diligence on it. Check the functionality, understand how long it's going to take to roll it out, understand if there's any risks, and then look at the cost. And if you produce a heat map across a number of different types of products that you're looking at, then you've got the factual evidence there to allow you to understand whether you're moving forward with that product or not. And in Edinburgh, what we did was we removed a piece of software and put a new one in, and it's actually stood the test of time and has helped us manage the COVID period very successfully also, because that particular supplier was able to stand up a platform for me within 3 weeks to allow me to service the vulnerable and those that were shielding across Edinburgh, and allowed us to get medication and food parcels out to them. So they really stood the test of time. So be bold and have confidence in your conviction is what I would say.
Excellent, great insights. Thanks, Nicola. Lindsay, you've spent a lot of time working with Nicola and the council. What would you add regarding what worked well, and maybe as it relates to the partnership, how things worked well together?
Yeah, so the work that we do with Edinburgh Council, I mean, it's a huge privilege for us. We touch every single citizen within Edinburgh Council and affect their day-to-day life. So it's a huge privilege, and it's a huge responsibility. Nicola has talked about strategy. That's been really helpful for us as an organisation in terms of setting the direction, setting the vision for the future of the city of Edinburgh. And one of the things I particularly enjoy about working with the council is they're very bold. So Nicola spoke a little bit earlier on about the smart city agenda that's now being driven through. Edinburgh have come out publicly to say that they plan to be one of the world's smartest cities. And as a supplier to the Edinburgh Council, it gives us clarity around the direction of travel, the investments that are going to be made, and builds excitement within the team that they're going to be part of something, world leading. So the strategy is clear, and to Nicola's points, having that strategy clearly defined, well ahead of the current pandemic, and since Nicola has come on board, actually gave us an opportunity to accelerate some of the components of that during the current pandemic, which we wouldn't have been able to do if we didn't have that clarity of vision and direction. So for us, the critical success factor and why we've been able to achieve so much, in the last couple of years in particular, has really been down to that bold vision being set out from the outset, that we could then accelerate particular elements of the digital transformation in the current climate.
Excellent, thanks, Lindsay. And I think we've talked about the journey, which started a while ago for both of you, and we've touched on pivoting through COVID. Let's talk about that directly now. Then, it's clear COVID has obviously had a massive global impact. Every industry has been impacted. Government has been one of the most resilient, I think, at least from our perspective. We look across industry. Jon, how has COVID impacted your digital strategy, and what are some of the capabilities you had to leverage as you responded to and then started to rebound from the pandemic?
So I have exceptional timing, and it just so happens that when we were deploying our IFAM's accounting and acquisition system, the first tranche of training, the in-person training that we were scheduling in St. Louis, Missouri, happened right about the time the pandemic was picking up, and there was a lot of discussion about whether people should gather or travel or not. And so we did a lot of hand wringing. We decided we were going to have it in person anyway, and then people became even more concerned. So we had to transition to a digital platform, which we hadn't really planned for. And so we did it online, and it went okay. But afterwards, the customer feedback suggested that it was not detailed enough for a lot of people because it wasn't hands-on. So we actually had to go back and regroup and redo some training modules that were virtual, but also hands-on, doing transactions, which set us back a little bit. So, obviously we had to be flexible in our approach. And so once we did that, we had sort of another problem with a group. This is with the National Cemetery Administration. And we had a number of workers out in the field, and these could be like small shops at the veteran cemeteries. And these are, workers that sort of work in the cemetery, but they also have to input some financial transactions like purchase card, credit card purchases and things like that. And so once they went through the training, they realized this is going to take us a lot more time because we're asking more information from them. And we determined that that was not going to work for them. And so we had to reconfigure some of their responsibilities a bit and consolidate some functions. And so it was sort of like multiple enemies, an army of one. It seems like at every turn, the pandemic sort of created uncertainty and some problems, and we had to recover from that. And then the training revealed some more problems. We had to recover from that. But the net effect was we got through it all. We got through it, I think, and got people into a better place. We did have to slip the deployment for a couple of months, which was worthwhile. But again, I think patience and persistence, and something that I'd like to reinforce that Nicola said, which are actually the two most important things. What she said about having the right team with the flexibility and the understanding the vision and the, I think, enthusiastic support for the vision, that is the absolute number one most important thing. And also engaging with the stakeholders. We have a stakeholder that's very wed to this. They're very excited about it. If it weren't for that, this would have fallen apart in the pandemic, like in 2 minutes. If people didn't want to do it, like there was any excuse to not do it. So you got to have the right team. You got to have the buy-in. And then I think you can get through things like the pandemic, which was a substantial barrier for us at first.
Yeah, I think the business agility is certainly something that we're hearing, wide and deep, that is critical to responding and rebounding during the pandemic. Jim, anything that you want to add to what Jon
one
said?
of the things that is, I think, important is as you do these systems, there's a tremendous amount of change management that has to go with it. So it takes that leadership and that persistence. The other is the human-centered design piece of it, and Jon sort of alluded to that, but paying attention to the people that are actually going to be the frontline users of these systems becomes really important, and having that very active engagement and feedback so that, as Jon talked about, you can adapt what you're doing to make sure that it is actually meeting the needs of the people in the front line and not causing frustration, but actually making their lives better.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Jim. Nicola, how about in the UK, I guess, what were some of the impacts? You talked to some of them, you touched on a little bit earlier. What were some of the impacts and what were some of the key capabilities you saw that you had to leverage to be able to respond?
Yeah, sure. Similar story. I mean, very quickly, I would just touch on what we've spoken about before. When I talk about having a good team round about you, sometimes people shy away from that because they think you need an army. But actually, with me, it's like a small team that looks at change within my customer team. It's like a team of 12. So people shouldn't be put off that they need a huge army to try and change a culture or a strategy in an organization. You start small and you build it up. And this current way of working in the pandemic for a local authority has absolutely given me gravitas to move forward with our strategy. A local authority can sometimes have a bit of a lag with digital and how to use tech. And very quickly, what we've got is all the leaders and the whole organisation navigating and working remotely using Teams and remote meetings, which has been unprecedented for a local authority. We've given our teachers access remotely to the systems that they require to educate our children. We've increased the capacity that we now have in our organisation for people to work remotely, which has been amazing. We've got a population of around 5,000 employees within Edinburgh City Council that didn't have access to council systems because of the nature of work that they do. And actually through working with CGI and some of our partners, we got access to tech that allowed people to download an app that gave them access to be able to access their payslip and just information that was happening in our organisation. Never happened before. So what this pandemic has allowed us to do is allowed people to understand that they can move at pace and to have no fear of that. And many, many years ago, when I was working in financial services, the chief exec of that large financial institution, when we were having to get budget savings and make efficiencies then, he said, sooner rather than perfect. You will have people in your organisations that want to package everything up perfectly, dot I's and cross T's, but actually you can change the game in your organisation, but you don't have to make it perfect. Just push and get progress, and you don't have to package it all in a nice little bowl. You'll find that you can make your organisation efficient. Don't sweat the small stuff. Keep pushing and you'll find you can actually make such a huge shift, which is what Edinburgh is beginning to see happening, which is why we're now moving on to the next part of our strategy, which is a smart city agenda, which is super exciting for us.
You talked about accelerating the pace and thinking differently. One of the concerns we often hear about is people are worried that we're going to go back to the old way of thinking. And so how are maybe Lindsay, I'll ask your perspective on how we navigate it, and then maybe anybody who wants to kind of talk about how do we avoid stepping back and going back to the old way of thinking and maintaining the accelerated pace that we're on.
Yeah, so Nicola and I have spoke about this a lot. Absolutely, what we don't want to do is sleepwalk back to February, for obvious reasons. And if nothing else, that there must be something good that comes out of this pandemic for all of the heartache and fraughtness that it's caused. So we've been really keen to pull out the positive and the go forward position and the acceleration. As Nicola has intimated, we moved at Peake to be able to mobilise and support the users across Edinburgh Council to continue to deliver critical services, health and social care out to very vulnerable people, education to the young people across the city was incredibly important. And what we found, as Nicola says, is rather than trying to achieve and strive for perfection, actually, 70–80% was good enough. And then we could build on it when it started, once it had been rolled out. The users were actually very accommodating around that, given the current circumstances. So actually the strive for perfection and perhaps the expectation within the user base wasn't quite aligned. So it's given us a real lesson around pushing forward at pace and moving quickly. I think also as well what we've been looking at is our respective governances processes within each organisations. Sometimes over time, organisations can get stuck in red tape and processes get built up for what are good reasons at the time, but what the pandemic has shown us is that we need to react and respond quickly. We can do it in a matter of weeks, not months and not years. And one of the initiatives that we've been running through is actually taking the accelerated processes that we've been driving through and actually building that into business as usual so that we've got repeatable processes moving forward to allow us to continue the pace both for the next 6 to 12 months, but then thereafter when we're out of the other side of this.
Excellent, thanks, Lindsay. I think I want to try to keep a little bit of time for questions, and I want to shift to the topic of leadership for a minute because we talked about how culture and management of change, has been a barrier. You need to overcome that barrier as we pivoted and navigated to the impacts of COVID. We talked about some of the leadership capabilities, business agility, rethinking the supply chain, enabling a different style in the future of work so we don't step back. We've seen, I think, over the years, as with a continued focus on digital transformation, that leadership roles and structure have changed. It used to be something that was under the CIO. Then more people started to, name and appoint and hire digital officers. The reporting structures have changed. I'd be interested in hearing your views on, I guess, some of the key leadership attributes that it takes, how the leadership teams work together, and some of the changes we've seen. So, Nicola, maybe we can start with you.
Yeah, I guess I'm very fortunate because I've got a foot in both camps. I have customer service and I have digital service. So, and those two areas have joined up so well, because I am an operations person. That's my background, and to have the IT element has just been the sort of second part of the jigsaw. You have a vision, and you want to drive good service for customers and a good customer service experience, and then I've got a team that is able to help me facilitate that by driving tech. So it's been a real such a great environment to work in, and my two teams work so well together. It's really joined up. I see these two teams as being the wrap around the organisation that helps facilitate making things happen, which is really our strapline in Edinburgh. There are so many people that can talk about concepts and they can talk about plans. And actually what I try to do is take those plans and operationalize them and make it real. And that's the reason that we've had such buy-in from our elected members and politicians, because it's not just hot air and it's not just chat. They've actually saw it become a reality in front of their eyes. And some of them actually reside in Edinburgh and have been able to report things very quickly and online. So they start to trust what you do. So when you move on to your next program or project, they actually believe you're going to do it. And I believe, look, this is probably no different to what everyone talks about with leaders, but I have a passion and a drive to really do something different. And I would encourage everyone out there to be bold and to have a vision. But more importantly, what I say to all of my team is, regardless of our grade and our rank and actually what we do in the organisation, we're all pretty much equal. We just do different roles within the structure. And as a result of that, it empowers people to spread their wings and actually to try new things and to have creative ideas, which is why I think the team has been so successful. They feel safe, and they feel safe to try things and to look at new programs and projects. And that actually just makes your strategy grow and makes it even more successful.
Thanks, Nicola. And yeah, it really is a team sport, isn't it? And Jon, when you and I were talking before this, we talked about, your role as a CFO, but the fact that you're the current champion in the leadership team for your current digital program. Explain a little bit about, how that happened. And you also said it might be different if the program was different and that hat might be passed around. So, what's your perspective on that?
I think my experience is that these things tend to work best if it's the user community that is leading it, co-leading it, or at least a champion of it. But in the end, you have to have a senior leader that is the champion, I guess, that is coaxing, pushing, pulling, assuaging people's concerns, sort of driving it, because these things can take a long time and wear people down. So my sense is that to the extent that you can build collaboration, build excitement, and be the person that consistently is driving the vision to keep it on track. And to give you an example, you talked, I was curious or interested in a comment you made, Mark, about not wanting to go back. We led an effort a couple of years ago, and I bet Dr. Peake remembers this, to replace the time and attendance system in the VA. And it got a lot of negative impressions from the VA employee, especially the clinical community, especially nurses. They were picketing in front of VA medical centers. We actually had people physically threatening our staff that were deploying this system, this VA time and attendance system called VATAS. But you know what? It took us about 3 years. We deployed it. And I get more compliments now on that stupid system from people saying they could never go back to the old system. And the only way we're able to get that through is, by having people drive it, leadership drive it. I mean, even at the user level, unfortunately, a lot of them did not support it. But once we got through it and people got used to it, then they didn't want to go back to anything else. And so a lot of it is just through your own, your guile, your cunning, your tenacity, to stay with it and push it. And a lot of times when people get a taste of the new thing, the new IT solution, they love it.
That's great. Transformation is tough. Change is tough.
Very tough. No one got hurt though.
Yeah.
Remember that? You remember VATAS? You were probably around when they started that.
Yeah, there's more than one of those in the VA, actually. A lot of people don't understand the complexity of the VA, though. When you start thinking about it, there's 330,000 or more employees within the VA, 3 different administrations, all serving veterans, but also, as I suggested, across every geographic expanse of the United States of America. So it is a big, complex bureaucracy. Some people say, well, if you see one piece of the VA, you've seen one piece of the VA, not the whole thing. That cemetery system that Jon talked about puts a VA cemetery within 75 miles of every veteran. So it really is an incredible organization to make change in. I think we have in just in the health system alone, there's some 6 million folks that they take care of on a routine basis. And I think in Scotland there's like 5 million people. So it's there is an order of magnitude that creates some of the challenges that Jon has alluded to.
Perfect, thanks. It is incredible. Lindsay, before we move on, let's hear from you. What are your observations? What have you seen as far as leadership changes and key attributes to kind of drive this transformation forward?
We've talked about agility a lot already in this panel. I think not being afraid of change and help supporting our respective teams through change. A lot of members within CGI have gone through quite a lot of change, understandably, during the current pandemic. A lot of projects, understandably, have stopped. They've had to move on to new projects. They've had to learn and accrue new skills and creating a really positive experience about that and creating role models. I think is hugely important. And again, taking the good from this, we've had a number of individuals who have gone through boot camps and new technology and come out the other side with a brand new skill set and profession that they didn't have at the start of the pandemic. These are so important to supporting digital transformations, across all of our client base. So actually stepping into the breach, stepping into the change, and actually creating programs that members of staff get really excited about. From their own personal development perspective, I think is something, particularly from an IT side of things, is something that has been even more prevalent in the last 6 to 9 months, and definitely something that we want to take forward and continue to evolve.
Excellent, thanks, Lindsay. I'm keeping an eye on time. I think we've got about 5 minutes left, and I do want to see if we can maybe take a question or two as well. So maybe what we'll do, I'll go around the panel. Maybe if you can each just sort of take a couple of seconds, and as we wrap up, just any last comments or words of advice you want to leave us with today. Time permitting, we'll take a question or two, and then we'll finish up. Why don't we start? Jon, let's start with you.
So I wanted to reemphasize something that Nicola said that I also think is super important, and that is don't make what's that saying, that the perfect the enemy of the good, and that is to start small sometimes, get some wins under your belt as a proof of concept, and that's something that has really helped us. To one of Dr. Peake's points with Congress, they're very dubious about the VA. We've had a lot of IT failures under our belt, and so every time we start out, they remind us, they sort of rub our nose in it. And so one thing I would say is, don't be afraid to start, but get some wins, build some confidence, and then it sort of radiates from that. And again, it's not always the first out of the gate. You may not be successful. Sometimes you have to go back a couple times at it, unfortunately.
All right, we'll stay in the U.S. for a minute before we head back to the U.K. Jim, how about
just since this is really a big government audience and a government panel, I just talk about the important role of government in not allowing us to go back and take advantage of what we have experienced with COVID, because there's a regulatory arena within which we all live, and in the United States, many of those regulations in the area of, example, telemedicine have been lifted transiently. So we've made 10 years of progress in 6 months in telemedicine, as an example. The opportunity to help our elected leaders shape the regulatory environment to allow this progress to be made, I think is important.
Perfect. Thanks, Jim. Let's head over to the UK, and Lindsay, we'll start with you, and we'll finish with Nicola.
So it's the clear strategy and investing the time up front and spending time on that. The strategy and the vision is so important for alignment, not just within the government side of things, but also within the supply chain. So if there's clear direction and strategy and vision set, then it allows the full team to get behind and drive that forward at pace. So for me, it's investing the time and then communicating that across not just the organisation, but also the corresponding supply chain as well, to ensure true alignment and true clarity of direction.
Perfect. Thanks, Lindsay. And Nicola, we'll give the final piece of advice to you, and then we'll take a question or two.
Oh, wow, no pressure to finish off this way. What I would say is government work is so important, and I think we've got to really understand that. It affects the lives of all of those that you live in, and you can make things better for those people that live in that city. We've all got to understand there is a need to change, and also have the will to change. It doesn't matter how good you think you are, there's always going to be something that you can do to improve. To understand the need to change, I think we've all referenced this. Have a strategy, build robust business cases that demonstrate your facts and the benefits that you can get from implementing those solutions. Have a little team round about you that can help you make things happen. And one of my sayings is never give up. It doesn't matter how challenging things can feel when you're trying to work on a program, how many detractors there are out there. Never give up. If you have facts and evidence and you can demonstrate your business case, keep going and you will win through. And lastly, what I would say is make sure you have a sponsor in your organization. Even if you're the champion, make sure there's someone at the top of the tree that's willing to sponsor you to help get your plans and kick them into action.
That's fantastic. Thanks, Nicola. Never give up. A great way to end on that, as we're going through many things at the moment, digital and not, through life. I think we're pretty much timing out here. I'm not sure that I'm going to have a chance to go to questions, because we probably take more time trying to answer the questions. So we will go through and try to get answers back out separately from here. So I guess I just want to take a moment to thank all of you for joining today, sharing your insights with the Canadian team and the global audience. And have a great weekend, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Take care, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you for the folks watching and back in the back channel. We'll encourage our guests to engage with you directly there themselves. I'll encourage you to go and join either a conversation on authentic leadership to create inclusive spaces, or how to use technology to mitigate this pandemic, or join a town hall, or move around the lobby or other spaces. Please keep meeting and greeting. Keep those questions coming. We do appreciate hearing from you and see more of you online. Take care.